The old-timers in Willow Creek, Ohio, had a saying, "The fields remember." For nearly 100 years, the fields surrounding the abandoned Gable farm had remembered a secret, and according to the legend, a lonely spirit had been watching over it the entire time. Maya Corbin, host of the historical mystery podcast Forgotten Frequencies, didn't believe in watching spirits, but she did believe in secrets. That's what brought her and her recording equipment to the edge of a desolate cornfield, staring at the skeletal remains of the Gable farmhouse. The official story was simple. In the autumn of 1934, during the height of the Great Depression, the Gable family had packed their belongings, abandoned their farm, and vanished, presumably seeking a better life in California like so many others. But the local legend was better. It whispered that the Gables never left. They were kept by the land, protected by their youngest daughter, Lily, a strange, silent child who was said to be a watcher. A watcher of what? Maya had asked the town's elderly librarian earlier that day. The woman had leaned over her desk, her voice dropping. Of the land, of its secrets. They say her spirit is still tied to that old willow tree by the house, watching. Now, standing before the property, Maya could see the tree. It was a colossal, ancient willow, its branches drooping like a weeping giant, dominating the landscape. The farmhouse itself was a study in decay, its roof sagging and its windows like vacant eyes. An oppressive silence hung in the humid summer air, broken only by the rustle of millions of cornstalks that surrounded the property on three sides like an army standing guard. As she stepped onto the property, a strange feeling prickled her skin, distinct, unnerving sensation of being watched. She scanned the empty fields, the vacant windows. Nothing. Just the town's ghost stories getting to me, she muttered, adjusting the strap of her bag and heading for the house. The front door creaked open into a scene of utter emptiness. The official report was right. The house was stripped bare. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the grime-caked windows. There were no chairs, no tables, no forgotten relics of a family's life. It was a hollow shell, perfectly supporting the narrative that the Gables had packed up everything they owned. Maya walked through the downstairs rooms, her footsteps echoing unnaturally. The kitchen was empty. The parlor was empty. Everything was exactly as it should be. Yet the feeling of being an intruder, of being observed by unseen eyes, only intensified. It seemed to emanate from the very walls. A silent, expectant pressure. She headed upstairs. The first two bedrooms were as barren as the ground floor, but the third room, at the end of the hall, was different. It was smaller, clearly a child's room, and it was not empty. In the center of the room sat a small, intricately carved wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, suggesting it had been there for decades. Maya's journalistic instincts went into overdrive. Why would a family take everything but leave this? As she examined the box, she noticed something else. A section of the faded floral wallpaper was peeling away near the floor. Behind it, the plaster wall was covered in faint, childlike drawings, sketched in what looked like charcoal. They depicted stick figures, a man, a woman, and a small girl hiding behind a large weeping tree. Looming over them from the edges of the drawing were tall, menacing shadows shaped like men. The images were crude, but radiated a palpable sense of fear. The box was locked. After several minutes of careful work with a pocket knife, Maya managed to pry the simple lock open. Her heart pounded as she lifted the lid. She didn't find gold or forgotten valuables. Instead, the box was filled with a strange collection of items. A dozen small, exquisitely carved wooden birds. A single, perfectly preserved pressed willow leaf, and tucked at the very bottom, a small, leather-bound diary. The diary's cover was embossed with a single name, Lily. Her hands trembling slightly, Maya sat on the dusty floor and opened it. The entries were written in the simple, looping script of a child, but the words told a story far more complex than any ghost tale. Lily Gable wasn't a supernatural spirit. She was just a quiet, observant child. Her watching wasn't paranormal. It was a heightened awareness of the world around her, of the secrets the adults whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. The new family is here. One entry read, "They are scared." Ma says the shadows are looking for them. PA says our farm is the last stop on the line. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The last stop on the line. It wasn't a train line. She flipped through the pages. The diary was filled with observations about hiding food, about keeping quiet at night, about the shadow men who sometimes came to the farm asking questions. The Gables weren't just farmers. They were protectors. They were hiding a family fleeing something terrible, not the depression, but a more immediate, violent threat. The final entry, dated the night the Gables vanished, was short and chilling. The shadows are close. I can hear their cars on the road. Ma is crying. PA says we have to go to the watcher's seat. He says the willow will keep us so safe. He says we will leave the house empty, so the shadows think we ran. We will not run. We will watch, and we will wait. The watcher's seat. The willow tree. It wasn't a ghost story. It was a plan. Maya scrambled out of the house, the diary clutched in her hand. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the land. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, but it no longer felt menacing. It felt protective, guiding. She walked directly to the ancient willow tree, its massive trunk, a gnarled fortress of bark. She circled its base, her eyes searching. The legend, the diary, the drawings, it all pointed in. Behind a thick curtain of drooping branches, she found it a slight, unnatural depression in the earth. Concealed by a tangle of thick roots, heaving with all her strength, she pulled at a large, flat stone that looked out of place. It shifted, revealing the dark, wooden edge of the door. It was a root cellar, a storm shelter, perfectly hidden at the base of the tree. With the help of her phone's flashlight, she pried the door open and descended into the cool, earthy darkness. The shelter was small, but it was clear this was the Gable's secret. This was the heart of the mystery. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle. There was only a small, empty lantern, a few discarded blankets, and another carving on the wall, a simple map of the creek and the woods leading north. They hadn't vanished to California. They hadn't been taken by the land. They had staged their disappearance, leaving an empty house behind to throw the shadows off their trail. Then, under the cover of darkness, they had used this shelter to hide, and then guided the family they were protecting to safety through the wilderness, becoming fugitives themselves. Lily Gable wasn't a ghost haunting the farm. She was a brave little girl who had used her knowledge of the land her watching to save lives. As Maya climbed out of the shelter, a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the willow tree above her, sounding almost like a contented sigh. The oppressive feeling of being watched was gone, replaced by a profound, peaceful silence. The watcher's duty was finally over. Her story had been found.